COVID plunged the world into recession, leaving millions of Americans without work. Yet somehow the housing market boomed. How is that possible? Of course, people were fleeing blue states and foreclosures were put on hold, but does this really explain the skyrocketing prices and staggering shortage of homes? Well, this week, my questions were answered. And it's much, much more sinister than you'd think. Join me for this today on today's show. Welcome to Man in America. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse, coming to you live from Columbus, Ohio. Let me start by asking you, how many of you in your local markets have seen things going absolutely insane with the real estate market? Tell me in one sentence, in the comments, tell me in one sentence what you're seeing happening in your region. From what I'm seeing, there's an incredible shortage of homes. Homes are selling within 24 hours of listing, if they're even getting listed on the market. They're selling as soon as they hit MLS. And they're selling for, say for a $300,000 home, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $80,000 over asking. So tell me what you're experiencing with this, because there's something strange going on. And that's what we're going to be diving into for this week's show. And of course, greetings to all of the people, the same names I'm seeing that are coming, every show. I love to see you here. Thank you for joining. And to anybody new that's joining me, thank you. Thank you for joining us on today's show. Just so you know, if you're new to the show, I am doing live shows every Tuesday and Thursday at noon Eastern time. They usually run about an hour. Today's show might go a little bit beyond that. I managed to go into a little bit of a rabbit hole with this subject, and I've got some personal reasons as to why I was even digging into it further. But I'm seeing too that some folks are saying, Javier saying all sold, Christian saying overpriced, Stoke US saying properties moving fast, yada yada yada. Prices doubled here. Kay is saying, yes, rising in California and Florida, which is interesting that we have the prices going up in, say, California, even though people are leaving California en masse, which is very interesting. Julie saying exactly what you're saying in Alaska economy is garbage, which is interesting, right? We're not just seeing it as you would think. We're not just seeing this happen in, say, Florida and Texas, or in areas like upstate New York, where you're having a lot of people that are leaving the big cities. People are seeing this happen all over the place, even small, kind of crappier areas. There's no housing inventory. The prices are going through the roof. And what's behind all this? That's my question. As I usually try to ask, what's happening behind the scenes, right? Fauci's emails come out. Well, what's behind the scenes of those emails? Why is this happening? So I want to share a little bit of my personal story. I recently moved back to Ohio, was renting, and have actually been looking for a house over the past year. And I'm running into the same things where we find a house that we like, where it's beautiful, it's coming on the market in 6 days. By the time it goes on the market, within the first day, it's got 6 offers. If we really love the house, maybe we made an offer on it. We find out then it goes to next and I think what is best and last. So it turns into a small auction, and the house ends up. We put a strong offer. The house goes for $100,000 over offering, and a lot of times it's selling to cash buyers. It's selling to people that are just coming in, sometimes not even looking at the house. They're buying the houses as is. They're waiving even rights to inspections, which this is incredible. It's insane what's happening, but what I keep asking myself, and my wife and I have had so many conversations about this, is why is this happening? Right? So the United States is going through one of the worst pandemics it's seen in a very, very long time. And the jobs are down, the whole economy has been gutted. Small businesses are closing up, and there's this massive wealth transfer happening. So why is this happening with the housing market? I've been thinking, is it a bubble? And I've talked to a handful of folks in real estate. We've had different agents helping us out, and there's different explanations, but no one really gives the whole story. They might say, well, because lumber prices are up, as you've probably have heard, I see a few you posting about that. Lumber prices are up, and so people are building less houses. The cost of a house has gone up 30%, 40% to build. A good friend of mine is a real estate developer, and he said, yeah, before COVID, I could build a house for 30% cheaper. He goes, now everything's more expensive, doorknobs, lumber, etc. I've heard that. I've heard that there's a relocation of people that are coming again from the blue states to the red states. But there's, again, things just aren't adding up, right? So I wanted to pull up one article to get us started here. And just I'll give you a quick forewarning. I've got a lot of content to review because basically within today's show, I'm going to be tying together the narrative of the housing market, the Great Reset, how it ties into Biden and the UN. So we're going into a deep dive into what's behind all this today. And before I jump in, just a quick reminder to like the video. That really helps us to bypass a lot of the censorship. I'm seeing YouTube deleting views, deleting subscribers. They're not my friends, as you've seen. So when you hit that like button, and even when you leave comments, it helps to bypass those limits, that censorship, and it helps get the algorithms going so we can reach more viewers. And if you really want to do the right thing, go watch me over on Rumble. Rumble now offers live streaming, so you can find me over there. If you don't have an account, create an account, subscribe to Man in America. The link is in the description below the video. And also, every website that I pull up today, if you look in the description, I have all the links there for you. So if you want to take one of these articles and show it to a friend or read the article yourself, all the links are there for you. And finally, if you want to follow me on social media, I would recommend either Telegram or SafeChat. Both those links are in the description. I'd say that I'm most active on Telegram. I haven't run into any kind of censorship there. Same with SafeChat. So if that's where you want to follow me, I'm a lot more honest with how I think about things, especially on Telegram. I share a lot of information. So I would recommend that that's where you hop over if you want to follow me. So, okay, let's dive into what's happening. Okay, so we've got an article here. This is from Vox. And this is just, again, this is an article that just is really summarizing what I talked about. They're saying COVID-19 caused a recession. So why did the housing market boom? What they're saying, the pandemic has seen soaring home prices and record housing insecurity. I'm not going to read too much in this. I'll just read a little bit of the intro here. I'll make it bigger so you can read along if you'd like to. If you want to see my smiling face, there you go. As they say, COVID-19 plunged the United States into a recession, leaving millions of Americans out of work and hungry. In the middle of the crisis, the housing market boomed. Between September 2019 and September 2020, homeowners accumulated a collective $1 trillion in additional home equity. The exploding demand of the past year, in conjunction with historically low supply of housing, has led buyers to desperately bid up the prices of available properties, sending home prices soaring. Right? So what you'll see is a lot of the media that are covering this, they're, again, similar to Fauci, they're stopping at the surface. They're trying to feed you a little bit. They're saying, well, the lumber prices are up because of, Canada is shut down. The U.S. gets our lumber from Canada, and because of COVID and Canada is stricter with the lockdowns, they're always feeding you a little bit there, so that you might be like, oh, okay, that's why, right? But I never believe what they just tell us, right? I never believe it. There's always more, and that's what we have to keep looking for. Okay, so let's look at this article. Interesting article, Wall Street Journal, saying, if you sell a house these days, the buyer might be a pension fund, which this is interesting. So with this article, they're talking specifically about one of the examples is this housing development in Texas. Okay, and so let me read a little bit about this. says a bidding war broke out this winter at a new subdivision north of Houston, right? So we know that Houston's one of the areas there's been a mass flowing of people moving into Houston, because they've been open, a lot of reasons why. But the prize this time was the entire subdivision, not just a single suburban house. Let you read along with me. Illustrating the rise of big investors as a potent new force in the U.S. housing market. So it's saying is, so the builder D.R. Horton, Inc. built 124 houses in Conroe, Texas, rented them out, and then put the whole community, Amber Pines at Foster's Ridge, on the block. A who's who of investors and home rental firms flocked to the December sale. The winning $32 million bid came from an online property investing platform, Fundrise LLC, which manages about $500 million on behalf of 150,000 individuals. It's more like a crowdsourcing. They pull together the funds from over 100,000 people to invest in real estate for them. So a quote from the builder's finance chief, he said, quote, "We certainly wouldn't expect every single family community we sell to sell at a 50% gross margin." So this bid they put in was a significant margin over the asking price. So what we're seeing is that, and again, why aren't the other places mentioning this when they're talking about the home prices, right? That lumber's going up. They're giving you those basic stories, but they're not going into the bigger reasons. And as I mentioned before, when I was talking about the research that we're doing in our process, someone in our neighborhood is in real estate, and she deals in very, very high-end real estate. We're in a suburb of Columbus, and I was asking her, and this was the first time I started to get a little bit of an answer. But I asked her, I said, why are the home prices doing this? Like, what are you seeing, and why amidst the pandemic? And what she told me at that time was the first time I heard. She goes, it's the investors coming in. The investors, she's like, a lot of Wall Street money is now coming into the buying up single family homes, which, that was the first time I heard that. It seems strange to think about a big company like BlackRock, buying a $400,000 home. That seemed odd to me. But she says, she's like, we might be selling a house for somebody, and you might have a family with, say 2 children, a lot of millennial aged families. They're buying their first home now. Maybe it's a $400,000 asking price. They might offer, say, $450,000. She says, but then we have an investor come in. They might offer $500,000. They're paying cash. They're waiving the inspections. And so they're completely out buying. And so the middle class folks, they're not able to buy these homes. So that was what she had shared with me. And it made sense, but I couldn't think about where's that lead to, right? So what this means in a bigger way is exactly how the New York Post has summarized this by saying that this article, how corporations are buying up houses, robbing families of the American dream. So this came out in July 18th of last year, where we started seeing this happen. And they're talking here about this a Phoenix real estate developer who's bidding on a house, and he usually is winning, but it's going for way over asking. So this is someone that's more buying at the auction level of when homes go into foreclosure. They have to go to auction, which is where a lot of the institutions were first doing a lot of their buying. So this is incredible. I'm going to read you a few parts of this article because to me, and I'll make this big for you so you can check it out with me. This is insane what they're saying here. So this guy's telling a story of a bidder that had won, and he's asking, Jacobs was bewildered. Who was this aggressive bidder that outbid him? By the end of the day, he had a name. The bidder was from an outfit called Invitation Homes. Invitation Homes, it turned out, was owned by Blackstone Group, which is not BlackRock. It's different. Blackstone Group, the world's largest real estate investor. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if BlackRock is sitting on the board. I don't know that for sure. I didn't look into that. So that was who they were buying. But they basically said, though, is that Invitation Homes was on a $10 billion spree purchasing $150 million worth of houses per week. So, quote, at an auction in Sacramento, a house flipper named Ryan Heck was bewildered by a bidder who bought every house that hit the block, noting that the bidder went $1 over every other bid until the other bidders conceded. So, quote, neither Heck nor the other regulars recognized the dollar over guy. It turned out he was with an out-of-town concern called Treehouse, and he had instructions to buy everything that cost less than what it would cost to build a similar house. Every house that day, auction that day, fit the bill. So this is interesting. What they say is that this buyer, well, typically they go in, they've got their cashier's checks. So saying he had a handful of cashier's checks. The new guys had duffel bags, right? This is what they're saying is that literally these buyers that are backed by these big corporations are coming in with duffel bags full of cashier's checks and buying up these homes. Now, these are being bought at auction, right? So obviously you have to look at, okay, who are the regular characters involved? Here we've got Warren Buffett, B.W. Hughes that are buying up a lot of these single family homes. Okay. So, but one of the big firms that one of the big financial firms that these purchases are being linked to is BlackRock. Okay. So I'm going to dig into BlackRock a little bit here because they need to be dug into to understand the bigger picture of what's going on. So BlackRock, this is an article. This is back in 2014, right? So this is an article talking about BlackRock and KKR buy a majority stake in a U.S. home rental company. They're saying that asset managers and private equity firms finance growth in single-family market as demand rises. So what it says is that BlackRock, the world's biggest money manager and private equity firm, KKR have gained a majority stake in Home Partners of America, a single-family rental company backed by mortgage-backed securities pioneer Lou Ranieri. Okay, I'm not going to go into the details of that, but what you're seeing happening is you have these home rental companies like Invitation, and they're buying up all these homes so that basically they can take them, they can rehab them, and then they can rent them out. Okay. So what's happening though is, and there's a different article I didn't share with you, but these big companies are buying up all these homes. And they're saying they're going to revolutionize this. And because of these big companies, they can service the renters extremely well. But there are so many lawsuits against these rental companies because fundamentally they're trying to please the shareholders. So they're cutting costs, they're cutting back on the repairs. So they're not doing the public any good. It's actually been really detrimental to people trying to live and trying to support themselves, because a lot of folks, as you're seeing now, are being forced into renting because they can't afford to compete. And even if they can, let's say that people can afford to purchase a home. Let's say you have a young family with good work history. Say they're making $120,000 a year with steady jobs. If they're trying to buy a $400,000 house, my guess is they don't have $400,000 sitting in their bank account to buy a house in cash. They're looking to get financing. And even with a strong down payment, say put $100,000 down, how can they compete with a BlackRock-backed company with basically unlimited money that's coming in and offering cash to buy the house outright and say they're giving, okay, hey, we'll give you $20,000 over the next best offer, and we're not going to do any inspections, et cetera. So even people in the middle class that have the money to do it, they are not able to actually even purchase the house. And this has been some of my experience personally too, in trying to buy a house in the Ohio market, that it's, you have these people coming in and they're offering way over what I would imagine. We're stretching, say, okay, we love this house, we can stretch to buy it. They're coming in way over that. So let's do a little bit of a more deeper dive into BlackRock and really looking into who are they and what are they, what's their power represent in the world. So looking at let's pull up this article here. This is Humans Are Free. Very interesting website, a lot of good information here. But I want to do a little bit of reading here. And I'm going to pull this up for you because this is interesting. So what talking about this article is the very top of the pyramid. Just 4 companies control the world, yet you've probably never heard of them. So I'm going to skip a little bit, but I'll start at the beginning. Some people have started realizing that there are large financial groups that dominate the world. Forget the political intrigues, conflicts, revolutions, and wars. It is not pure chance. Everything has been planned for a long time. So you might have people that have talked to you about, or maybe you've been telling your friends about the central banks and say, yeah, it's all goes back to the central banks, which I believe it does. I think it also ties into China a lot more than most people realize, which we're going to get into a little bit later in the show today. But let's look at what they're saying about these companies. So what they're saying, some call it conspiracy theories or New World Order, which the New World Order is just, it's actually no longer a conspiratorial term. It's even being used by a lot of the elites, and even Xi Jinping has publicly talked about the New World Order and one government. So what they're saying, though, is that the key to understanding the current political and economic events is understanding that there is a restricted core of families who have accumulated more wealth and power. We're speaking of 6, 8, maybe 12 families who truly dominate the world. Okay, and it's very difficult to look into them because it's like looking into the sky. How do you even begin to look into these people? You don't have their wealth listed on Forbes.com. So it's what they say is that we would not be far from the truth by citing Goldman Sachs, Rockefellers, Loeb's, Kuh, and Lehman's in New York, Rothschilds of Paris, the Warburgs, the names that you're maybe familiar with hearing. So they say most people have heard of the Bilderberg Group, Illuminati, or the Trilateral Commission. But what are the names of the families who run the world and have control of states and international organizations like the UN, NATO, or IMF? To try to answer this question, we can start with the easiest: inventory the world's largest banks and see who the shareholders are and who make the decisions. The world's largest companies are now Bank of America, JP Morgan, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs, and Morgan Stanley. Let us now review who their shareholders are. So this is, I pay attention to this part because this is very interesting, okay? They're looking at who the major shareholders or the larger shareholders are in all these companies. Bank of America, State Street Corp, Vanguard, BlackRock, FMR. JP Morgan, State Street, Vanguard, BlackRock, FMR. Citigroup, State Street, Vanguard, BlackRock, FMR. Wells Fargo, FMR, State Street, Vanguard, BlackRock. Right? It says, we can see that there now appears to be a nucleus present in all banks, all these banks. Okay, you see as a shareholder, State Street Corporation, Vanguard Group, BlackRock, and FMR, which is Fidelity. So to avoid repeating them, we now call them the Big Four. Goldman Sachs, the Big Four. Morgan Stanley, the Big Four. Right? They're naming who are the shareholders of these companies. Bank of New York Mellon, the Big Four. So State Street Corporation, one of the Big Four, also has the Big Four on their board. BlackRock also has this. So you can dig into this, but what you're seeing is that there's these 4 primary banks that have significant interest and control over all these other banks, right? I mean, I know that there's been a lot of analogies using the pyramid, but to be honest, I think that it's actually pretty accurate in its representation that as you go to the top, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. It's like like a company. As you go up, you've got fewer and fewer people. You have the VP level, you have the president, CEO, then the board, the chairman, et cetera. It gets smaller like that. But what we're seeing is that these 4 banks basically control the entire banking industry. Okay. Now let's look at how these things might tie into the Federal Reserve. So they're saying is, in short, the 8 largest U.S. financial companies, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Citigroup, Goldman Sachs, U.S. Bank Corp, Bank of New York Mellon, and Morgan Stanley, are 100% controlled by 10 shareholders, and we have 4 companies always present in all decisions: BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, and Fidelity. So in addition, the Federal Reserve is comprised of 12 banks represented by a board of 7 people, which comprises representatives of the Big Four, which in turn are present in all other entities. In short, the Federal Reserve is controlled by 4 large private companies: BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, and Fidelity. So I don't know about you, but if there's a global conspiracy of the bankers controlling things, sounds a little fishy to me, but it's hard to ignore these facts, right? So if we're looking at this, let's take a further look as we go in even more to BlackRock. And how might BlackRock tie into, I don't know, say, communist countries like China? Let's take a look. So here's an article. This is just from May 12th of this year. BlackRock expands China footprint with wealth management license. Because one of the questions I always ask myself when I'm looking at things is, where is China involved? Where's Xi Jinping? I know he's got his finger in all these pies, so he's got to trace it back. Okay, so BlackRock, which happens to be the biggest wealth manager on earth that's public that we know about, let alone who knows how many trillions of dollars these families are holding. So here's an article. This is recent. BlackRock expands China footprint with wealth management license. So what they're saying here, I'm just going to read the high-level parts to this, okay, this is on May 12th. So BlackRock has received a license in China for a majority-owned wealth management venture, expanding its footprint in the country's fastest-growing asset management market. So they basically they have a joint partnership with the China Construction Bank Corp, CCB, which is it's a state-run bank, right? So basically, this is a bank that is, in essence, owned and run by the Chinese Communist Party, right? So that's what you have. That's who they're partnering with. So you have BlackRock partnering basically with the CCP for this massive venture in China. Now, listen to this quote here. This is what makes my little spidey senses tingle, okay? This quote saying, BlackRock, quote, I highlighted this there for you. We can read it together. BlackRock will support China in building a sustainable ecosystem for investing, Chairman and CEO Larry Fink said. So whenever I hear these buzzwords, this is what gets me worrying. When I hear that there's a sustainable push behind things, whenever I hear that, I go straight to, okay, what's the UN's involvement? What's the involvement of the World Economic Forum? How does it tie into that? Because basically what, I'm going to get into this, the Green New Deal, the Great Reset, all this is tying back into being done under the guise of environmentalism and climate change, which we're going to talk more about this. So let's see, does BlackRock perhaps have any further involvement? We now see that they're investing and they're partnering in China with the CCP to make investing more sustainable and positive, right? Building a sustainable ecosystem for investing in China. It's so lofty. What saints these people are. But let's look a little bit into BlackRock and their motives, right? So BlackRock, who is one of the gigantic financial institutions that's buying up a lot of these houses in America. So everyday Americans like you and I, and this isn't just happening in America, you can trace this to Lloyd's Bank in London. It's happening in Ireland. This is happening all over the world, right? This is a global agenda, so makes sense it's happening all over the world, okay? So let's take a look, though, at some of BlackRock's ties to what's happening with the UN. Okay, so here, interesting article on oilprice.com. The Great Reset. BlackRock is fueling a $120 trillion transformation on Wall Street. Suspicious? Yes. I'll make this full size for you so you can take a look at it with me. So this is interesting. Big money is turning its backs on companies that aren't conforming to one simple idea: sustainability. There's your keyword. and it's fueling one of the biggest transfers of capital the world has ever seen. In fact, this was written at the end of last year. In fact, within a year, 77% of institutional investors will stop buying into companies that aren't in some way sustainable. And the new king of Wall Street is leading the charge. BlackRock, with over $7 trillion in assets under management, says its clients will double their ESG investments in just 5 years. Okay, we're going to get into ESG, what that means. It's one of the UN's new favorite words or combinations, one of their new phrases. Money managers on the street are saying that climate change is their top concern and a leading criteria when determining where to put their money to work. So what they're saying is that even though BlackRock is managing just under, say, $10 trillion, that there's already sustainable assets already account for $17 trillion. But they're also saying that there could be as much as $120 trillion that basically can be shifted. Okay, so let's think a little bit more about this. So here we have BlackRock. Okay, so as I understand, I'm not a finance background guy. If I'm going to invest in anything, it's gold and ammunition. And maybe some rice. But if we're looking at what's happening, so BlackRock, who is the king of Wall Street, okay, is basically saying that they're shifting their financing over to sustainable companies. And more specifically, they're companies that are ESG, which means environment, social, and governance metrics, okay, which I'm going to get into this in my next article. So what it's happening is that whether you like it or not, the UN-backed changes that they're doing, the pushing of their Green New Deal, which even the Green New Deal is just the branding it was given for the United States. It's much, much bigger than that. It's using environmentalism and climate change to basically implement a globalist, one world government, new world order. That's really what this is. Okay. But so BlackRock is doing that through Wall Street. Now, there is a video that I did. I was going to pull it up to show you, but I forgot. There's a video that I did back. It was the second video that I did called Puppet Elect. It was just after the plot to steal America. I recommend that you go watch it. It's a short video, but what it does in the video is it talks about there was basically a high-level financial advisor within the Communist Party that was bragging about their control over Wall Street. So how the Chinese Communist Party controls America through Wall Street. And he goes into more detail, and that's one of the reasons why they wanted to get Trump out, because Trump wouldn't cooperate with him. He was doing the opposite, okay? So, but dig into that article. It's called Puppet Elect. I highly recommend you watch it after this show. It's only 3 or 4 minutes long, or maybe 5 minutes long. It's a fun video. But what it exposes, though, is China's control over Wall Street, okay, which we've already shown that we have BlackRock that's partnering with the CCP bank in China. Okay, so what's happening? How does this all tie back into what we like to call the Great Reset? So this next article, this is a good one. All right, so here we're looking at this one first. How big banks are planning to force Americans into the Great Reset trap. Okay, so in June 2020, elites from around the world gathered to announce the launch of a plan to reset the entire global economy, a proposal they ominously named the Great Reset. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is not some tinfoil hat thing. This is, they're in public writing about this or putting books out about this. They're having conferences about this. All right, let me make this a little bit larger if you want to read along. So now here's your guilty characters. Among the many world leaders and powerful institutions that pledged their support for the Great Reset at the June meeting were, you guessed it, the IMF, International Monetary Fund, Prince Charles, the head of the United Nations, CEOs from major international corporations, and the World Economic Forum, with our favorite person, Klaus Schwab. right? So Klaus Schwab says every country from the US to China must participate in the Great Reset, and every industry from oil and gas to tech must be transformed. Okay, the famous transhumanist Klaus Schwab, the founder and the executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, and this is in an article he published on the World Economic Forum's website called, in short, "We Need a Great Reset of Capitalism." Again, they're not hiding it from us, folks. So what they're saying is that the initial justification for Great Reset was a COVID-19 pandemic. But from the start, supporters of the global economic overhaul repeatedly said that climate change was the long-term justification, that would allow a sustained, massive transformation of society. So again, you've got, obviously they're pushing the climate change, but then conveniently, we've got COVID that comes in, and COVID just so happens to be one of the greatest things to aid in their global wealth transfer. So you have to ask yourself, though, what do they want? What's their end goal? Are they hiding it from us? Well, no. If you actually look at it, they tell you exactly what they're trying to do. Okay, so let's take a look at a short video that this was put out by the World Economic Forum. It's 8 predictions for the world in 2030. You almost have to watch this video to believe it, which is what we're going to do. We're going to take a look at this video together. And I'll just show you the first 4 because the latter 4 is the first one I want to hone in on. So 8 predictions for the world in 2030. So there you go. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. To me, that sounds a little bit like communism, where they're literally telling us in their video they're putting out that their goal for the entire world is that the US is no longer a superpower. The world is controlled by a group of countries. A handful of countries will dominate. And literally, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy, is what they're telling us. So to me, it's hard to ignore what they're saying. They're putting it out. They're putting it out in the open for you. They're not hiding this. That's literally a video that was put out by the World Economic Forum. So how does COVID tie into this? And how is it, as we talked about in the beginning, that the housing prices are going through the roof, yet COVID's happening, you've got this massive wealth transfer, etc. And actually, Marion Graham Bruheim, you say a very good point. Why not we will own nothing? No, it's not we, right? When they're making this video, it's you. You will own nothing, not us. We're going to own everything. So you want to talk about communism here. This is a global communist system. You look at Xi Jinping. What are his ambitions? He's written this in his books. He talks about it all the time. His goal is to implement a global communist system. So, the UN has done a great job of branding it and making you think that you're going to be really happy and, oh, great, you can have a drone deliver a spatula when you need a spatula because you'll own nothing, but you'll be really happy. Okay, but let's look at how COVID has played into this, which, if you've been following my last couple of live shows, we've been digging deep into the role of COVID, what it's done, how it's completely messed everything up. The entire world has just gone to almost a state of being in a third world war that ties back to China. So do they have any reason to like this? Do they have any reason to implement COVID? Well, again, if you go back, you watch the World War III video. I did before the live show, the medical mafia, a lot of the Fauci stuff. We go into this. Okay, but let's take a look at how COVID ties into the Great Reset. So here we have, not that one yet, we're going to this one. So here we have an article that they're not hiding it from us. This is an article on the WEF forums. This is the World Economic Forum. This is on their website. Okay. The super wealthy won big as COVID-19 spread, and here's how they can alleviate the economic peril faced by most. So what they're telling us is that the super wealthy have made so much money off of COVID, yet the middle class, the poor people, really everyone but the elites, even what you think of as like the upper class or the rich people in America, say your neighbor owns a roofing business and he's worth $10 million. He's still a pauper. He is a peasant, right? Compared to these people that are, billionaires and trillionaires. So don't think that someone like that is part of that group. He's not. Right. And while you have all the people on the left saying, hey, redistribution of wealth, and if you're making over $400,000, your wealth needs to be redistributed. No, it's like the slaves arguing over which slave gets the better meal. The reality is, who are the slave masters? Who are the ones that have trillions of dollars? Who are the ones that have billions of dollars that are just completely raping and pillaging the world? So let's look at this article on the World Economic Forum, where they're saying that the world's billionaires got significantly wealthier as the pandemic spread. This has raised concerns about money flowing to the well-heeled instead of to services for those hit hardest by COVID-19. Now listen to this. Here's the key word. I'll make myself disappear so you can see it. Highlight this for you. It also points to broader potential implications for a sustainable reset of the global economy, right? Global billionaires managed to increase their collective wealth by 27.5% during the 4-month period. It's to $10 trillion. This is this is back in October. So this is just the beginning. It's gone way past this. News of the windfall for this elite club, they call themselves the elites. News of this windfall for this elite club of roughly 2,000 members comes alongside indications of trillions of dollars in lost wages and warnings that hundreds of millions of people will be pushed into extreme poverty this year as a result of the pandemic. Okay, so what we're seeing here is the Great Reset, right? It's the great transfer. It's a great wealth transfer. Okay, but how does communism work, say, in a country? Well, the people up top, they come in, they say, look, we're going to take everything that you own, we're going to take it and we're going to manage it for you, we're going to redistribute it for you, make it all equal, and we're going to fix all your problems. That's how communism's always worked. So what happened with COVID? It was almost as if it could have been a global push for communism. It's a global redistribution of wealth that was done without anybody's consent, where they have transferred literally trillions and trillions of dollars have transferred from the poor, the middle class, even the upper class, as we consider it, into the hands of these 2,000 families. Think about that. This all happened under the guise of COVID. And then you have here, again, look at this is Summit News. This is Paul Joseph Watson. Highly recommend you check out Paul Joseph Watson. Article he did, this was back in January. Bill Gates buying up huge amount of farmland while the Great Reset tells Americans future is no private property, right? Remember, you own nothing. You'll be happy. So feudalism makes a roaring comeback in the name of progress. So let's dig into this really quickly here, what this article is saying. So while Americans are being told by the Great Reset technocrats that the future is one without private property, Bill Gates and other billionaires, including Bezos, who are now, I believe, the two largest landholders in America, have been buying up huge amounts of farmland. Okay, so this is a quote from Forbes. After years of reports that he was purchasing agricultural land in places like Florida and Washington, the land report revealed that Bill Gates, who has a net worth of nearly $121 billion, according to Forbes, has built up a massive farmland portfolio spanning 18 states. Right, so he has 69,000 acres in Louisiana, 47,000 acres in Nebraska, or in Arkansas, 20,000 in Nebraska. So he now owns 242,000 acres of farmland across the United States, mostly through third-party entities like Cascade Investments, his personal investment vehicle. Okay, you've also got Jeff Bezos that's doing the same. Okay, so what he says is, what billionaire philanthropists and technocrats are acquiring land at an accelerating speed. They appear to be telling the general public that in the future, private property will virtually cease to exist. In his books, World Economic Forum founder and globalist Klaus Schwab, here you go again, makes clear that the fourth industrial revolution, or the Great Reset, will lead to the abolition of private property. That message is echoed on the World Economic's official website, which says, quote, "Welcome to the year 2030. Welcome to my city," or should I say our city. "I don't own anything. I don't own a car. I don't own a house. I don't own any appliances or clothes." Apparently, you won't be allowed to own any private property, and your only recourse will be to live in a state of permanent dependency on a small number of rich elitists who own everything. That used to be called feudalism, which is a form of slavery. And speaking of feudalism, which if you think about feudalism and the history of it, when you used to have the wealthier landowners and the peasant class, right? You had the peasant class that they were allowed to live on the land of the landowners, but at that time there had to be a balance. That there are a lot of instances of when feudalism was actually very successful because the landowners, it was symbiotic. The landowners let the peasants farm the land and they took care of them and they worked hand in hand. So if I had to go back to year 1300 and I was a peasant farming and I had my family, maybe I was a blacksmith and there's a landowner. And again, I'm not gonna say it was always fair back then, but I would be a million times more likely to trust, John the Great back then, who was my landowner, than trust people like Bill Gates, a well-known eugenicist, people like that, Jeff Bezos, Klaus Schwab. So that's what this is looking like. And even this is an article. This was before COVID, where the New York Post was talking about how America is reverting back to the feudal age. What they're saying there is that America's birth represented a dramatic break from the past. Save for a few vestiges of the old European feudal order, mostly in the plantation economy of the Deep South, there was no hereditary nobility, no national church, and thanks to George Washington's modesty, no royal authority. Now, they're kind of using this to pitch their the white narrative, but what they're basically saying here is that what we're seeing is that in recent decades, the country has begun to show signs of growing feudalism, which feudalism, I think in a smaller scale, was feudalism. Feudalism in a larger scale is what you call communism. It's what you might call tyranny this day and age. It's not about what they want you to think it is. This is what it's become. It's technocracy, right? It's, hey, do you have your digital ID? Do you have your passport? How's your social credit score? Well, we're not gonna rent you a lawnmower because you were online tweeting about Biden's tripping up the stairs. So no lawnmower for you. Like that's what these things turn into with the technocrats in charge, right? But so what they say though is they say that the country has begun to show signs of growing feudalism. This trend has been most pronounced in the economy, where income growth has skewed dramatically towards the ultra rich, creating a ruling financial and now tech oligarchy. This is a global phenomenon. Starting in the 1970s, upward mobility for middle and working classes across all advanced economies began to stall, while the prospects for the upper class rose dramatically. So they're not saying it's the rich. They're saying it's the ultra rich. It's the elites. It's what the World Economic Forum calls the 2,000 families. So this isn't about, again, this isn't about tax the rich and, hey, Biden's great because he's going to tax people that make over $400,000. Like, again, this is like the slaves stealing from the other slave who gets a bigger piece of bread, right? They're pulling away the entire view. They're hiding from view the fact that it's this tiny, tiny, tiny group of people at the very top that are orchestrating all of these things. Now, how do you know who they are? They always, like I said, they always reveal themselves. Okay. Well, what we saw emerging in the global campaigns was we had the phrase. They always have their phrases, right? Even the whole Black Lives Matter. The one thing you have to give them is they're great at branding. They're great at branding and creating phrases and creating movements. So one of the ones that maybe you've heard about is Build Back Better. So let's take a look at what we have here. So this is a Breitbart article talking about the Build Back Better, the latest code phrase for green global tyranny. So this was written back, and this was last year. This was written May of last year. This is just as the COVID was starting to emerge. So he's saying Prime Minister Boris Johnson has promised that once the coronavirus crisis is over, he intends to build back better for future generations. Okay. So what's really important though is it's a catchy, what they say, it's a catchy, fine sounding, optimistic phrase, but it's not one Boris invented himself. Its meaning, unfortunately, is a far cry from what you might hope to hear from a conservative prime minister rebuilding a wrecked economy. Many of the people who voted for Boris in the belief he was a conservative might hope that Build Back Better meant things like aesthetic beauty, durability, cost effectiveness, etc. Unfortunately, it's the exact opposite. Build Back Better is actually a United Nations invented phrase, and what it actually means is more world government, more green taxes and regulations, more expensive energy, more identity politics, more corporatism, and of course, less freedom and less entrepreneurism. Okay, this is what we're looking at here. This is Build Back Better. So if you look, okay, there you go. Boris Johnson, as you see, Build Back Better. Right there, he's got it. Okay, where else are we seeing this? Okay, Trudeau says Canada needs to build back better in New Year. That's strange. Why are you seeing this all over the place across the globe? And Canada, which you've seen how Canada has handled COVID. You've seen how the UK has handled COVID. It's become the greatest excuse to bring in basically their extreme government tyranny. Okay, here we have an advertisement from the United Nations Human Rights. This is, part of the EU. This hasn't even touched the Americas, saying building back better. How to place human rights at the center of the COVID-19 response in the global South. Okay, here we go again. Wow, look at this. Our favorite governor, Mr. Cuomo, lessons from this and learn lessons from this and build back better. Okay, again, another one of our favorite politicians. So where does this lead us to? Have you seen this before? Have you seen the Build Back Better recently in American politics? Well, how about this? Joe Biden, Build Back Better. Could you possibly have put Build Back Better in more places during his campaigns? Okay. So for the people that, and again, I try to do these shows in a way that if you have friends that are more liberal or even centrist, that you can share this with them and you can say, look, let's watch this episode together and have a conversation about this, right? Because we have to understand what's happening. So if someone voted for Biden and they believe that he has good intentions to take care of America, why is he not, or why is his main campaign slogan the same campaign slogan that the globalists have implemented, which is their way of bringing in a new world order? And you search for Biden, Build Back Better. You see it everywhere, absolutely everywhere. Let's look at here again, more examples of where you see all these people talking about Build Back Better, Build Back Better. And I wonder what the White House has to say about this. Let's look at the White House's website, the Build Back Better agenda. Wow. I wonder if there's any kind of a plan to bring this into America. I wonder if the Great Reset, the Build Back Better, the whole idea of you'll own nothing has something to do with the global banks that have strong ties with the Chinese Communist Party and the globalists. I wonder if that has anything to do with the fact that they're buying up real estate across America. They're buying up homes. They're buying up your homes that we need to be raising our families in so they can then rent us to them. So we won't own them. We'll be rented to us. What's going to happen if the globalist banks own half the homes in America? Well, what if they want to increase the rent? Do you think they can't conspire to do that? What happens if they want to take the cities like New York City, San Francisco, all these big cities that people have been fleeing, okay, which the prices of real estate in New York City have plummeted. So maybe, does that mean that they want to perhaps go back in, buy up those cities, convert them into smart cities, which if you look at what's happening in New York, for instance, all the technology, the monitoring technology, the cameras, everything that they're installing in those cities, converting them in what they call smart cities. So is the idea to use COVID to force us out of the big cities, drop the real estate prices in the big cities, come in, buy up the big cities, convert them into smart cities, buy up all of the single family homes across the nation, skyrocket the rent so that you're forced to either pay a really high rent for a house on an acre of land or a quarter acre of land in a suburb, or move back into the cities where they've got full control over you using their technology? I don't know. It sounds like it could be a fishy plot to take over the world. My goodness. And then, all under the guise of climate change. Now, if you saw this was yesterday, Biden issues warning about the greatest threat facing America and promises he's not joking. It gets better. President Biden told U.S. service members on Wednesday that top Pentagon officials consider climate change to be, quote, the greatest physical threat to U.S. national security. Well, we better build back better and redistribute the wealth and give it all to the billionaires and trillionaires because they have our best intention. They have our best, they have us in mind. Well, word fumble there. Okay. He said, this is not a joke. He says, you know what the Joint Chiefs told us the greatest physical threat facing America was? Global warming. Okay. Global warming. Now, one question, how does global warming tie to China? Well, as we've seen, all roads lead to China. Okay, let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at something I covered. I found this guy online who did this fantastic video. I'm going to play a short clip. It's maybe about a minute and a half. It's a beautifully done video about the climate change in China. Let's take a quick look at this, okay? Maybe you've seen this video. Maybe you even recognize the person in the video. I don't know. We'll see. Guess who's the #1 oil importer in the world? China. Now that the Keystone Pipeline project has been stopped, guess who's first in line to scoop up Canada's oil? China. And who'd be gloating the most to see U.S. independence get taken down a notch? China. And by China, of course, I mean the CCP. Let's take it further. Have you heard of rare earth elements, REEs? They're the key ingredients for green energy tech, like wind turbines and solar panels. Well, guess who controls 95% of the world's REEs? China. So who's most likely going to benefit from the race towards green energy? You got it, China. Let that one sink in. So while we pat ourselves on the back for rejoining the Paris Accord and marching towards a green new future, the CCP will be lining their pockets with our taxpayer dollars while choking the planet to sell us more petrol-based trash, just in time for landfill. China. So that, if you haven't seen it, that video was released. That was shortly after Biden took office, and it was called Red Flags, We were planning a second version to it, a part two. We got so busy with the live show. But if you haven't watched that video yet, it goes into the power grid. It goes into a lot of the things that Biden implemented as soon as he took office, undoing Trump's executive orders and how much it completely exposed us, especially to China, and how much all of his actions completely benefited basically the Chinese Communist Party. So if you haven't seen that, it's in the video section. I would recommend that you take a look at it because it just goes into this. So what we're seeing here, what is the narrative we're seeing here, right? It's the same narrative that we've been pointing out. It's Biden working hand in hand with the globalists, with the Chinese Communist Party, the coincidence of COVID and how COVID came led to this great transfer of wealth, the largest wealth transfer the world has ever seen. And, here we are. So now I think maybe you might understand why they wanted to get Trump out of office so much. He pulled us out of the Paris Climate Accord. He put massive tariffs against China. I recommend, if you haven't recently, go back and watch The Plot to Steal America. It's the main video on my YouTube page. It tells the whole story. This is why they had to get Trump out of office, and why, if what we have happening in the news right now is we have the entire story of Fauci's emails and, hey, did the virus come from a lab? To me, the question isn't, did it come from a lab or not? The question is, why are we not talking about and exposing the fact that it was intentionally released and used and working hand in hand? Look at Event 201, look at the UN. It became the greatest tool to bring in their global tyranny. But as you know me, I don't like to end on a negative note. And while unfortunately, a lot of what we're covering today is kind of a downer, there still is a lot that we can do. There's so much hope that I'm still seeing. So one thing is just a thought. If you are somebody, if you're looking, okay, what can I do? How can I change this situation? Well, one small thing is, if you're selling your house, tell your agent that you don't want to sell to a bank. Tell your agent, which your agent can do this for you. You, as the seller, you can pick who you want to sell to, and make it very clear with your listing agent that you want to sell to a family. You want to sell to a family that's going to buy your house, move in, and raise your family, raise their family in your home. That's one thing you can do. Maybe it means you're going to make $10,000 less on your house. Well, I think we ought to look at, what are we willing to sacrifice to preserve our country? That's one thing. The other thing is that if you're renting, for instance, look at who you're renting from. So my wife and I, we're currently renting. I'm renting from a neighbor, someone I know that owns the house, fantastic landlord. So if you're renting, don't be looking at places that are owned by these big rental companies. Rent from a small, local owner. If you're trying to buy a house, which this is my own personal story of this, if you're trying to buy a house, look at what matters to you. So we were looking at houses in central Columbus. The market was insane. All the prices are going for way up. They're competing with the banks, et cetera. So we said, look, let's move further out. So we found a home that's over an hour outside the big city. We have more land in the country. That's what you should be looking at. Look at, okay, I'm going to sacrifice a little bit of convenience. I'm going to move into a market that's not being completely controlled by the big banks. You'll get more for your money. Buy some land. Learn how to garden. Learn how to provide for yourself. Start making some of those lifestyle changes, because this is what they don't want. They want us to be forced into their big cities. They want to own all the real estate, et cetera. But let's not play their games. Okay. But beyond that, again, and this is the bigger picture, is don't be distracted by all this. I know that this is a whole episode. This is a big distraction, but we have to remember that right now the audits happening are the most important thing right now that we have to pay attention to. We have to help share that information, especially as it starts coming out, which sometime within the next week or so, I'm going to do another deep dive into the audits. to just take a look at what's happening with them, update you on what I see happening, where I see that going, because as we know, they had to get Trump out of office. Now, I can't talk about what happened last November on YouTube, but I think that if you're watching this, you know what happened, and you know what they're trying to hide. What they're trying to hide the truth of this. They do not want that truth to come out, and the audits are spreading to more and more states. And I think it's going to be a wave of truth they will not be able to contain. So we can't keep our eye off of that. We have to continue doing everything we can, because while yes, it's we the people, and I've talked about that a few times, getting involved in at the local level as we the people, but we also have to do our best to help our fellow Americans understand the truth of COVID, the truth of November 2020, the truth of President Trump and what he is doing for our country. Again, this is what I covered heavily in the plot to steal America. It's like this is why we're doing this. Like Trump is trying to protect us from this. He came in to protect us from the globalists, from the communists. There was a graphic that was shared around a little bit as a picture of Trump, and it said, they're not after me. They're after you, and I'm just standing in their way. And that's it. So, all right, well, I went way over. It's almost 10 after 1, which I hope you don't mind. I really enjoyed this. But I would say, again, the solution, I see Cuckoo Skin asking about the solution to this. It's a lot of things. Get involved locally. Actually, tonight, one of the governors that's running against our Rhino governor is having an event I'm going to try to go to meet him. So get involved locally at the school board level, build relationships with your local community, talk to your friends, try to share information with them to get more people to see what's really happening. You can share my show, other great websites, companies like the Epoch Times, other media, help do those things. Fundamentally, though, I think, as I've talked about before, I think this truly is a battle of good versus evil. And if you look at the CCP, you look at the UN, the globalists, I believe that a lot of those organizations, those circles are rooted in very evil, satanic, Luciferian practices. And their biggest fear is, we the people standing up, returning to our faith, returning to what our country was founded with, those principles, one nation under God. If we've fallen off track in our own spirituality, our own faith, see how you can get back to it. See how you can, reconnect with your local church, or even on your own, reconnect with that own spirituality, and see how you can improve your own self, because Satan will win if we allow him into our hearts. And so we have to, that's how we have to fix that within ourselves. So, yeah, that's it. I mean, again, a lot of these are topics that we keep talking about. And yeah, mentors, legacy, we are the plan. A million %. We are the plan. And then when I was talking to General Flynn out in Texas, that's one thing he said, you are the plan, right? Talking about all of us, we are the plan. There's no plan that we're going to sit back and enjoy the popcorn and wait for it to happen. Us taking control, we are the plan. So thank you again, everybody, for coming. Thank you, watching this live right now. I'm talking to you. Thank you so much for joining live, for supporting. Thank you for commenting and being so active with the discussions. I hope that you're meeting people that you can connect with offline, that we can all come together better. I really appreciate you participating. Just another quick reminder to hit the like button, to share, make sure you're subscribed, hit the little notification bell. If you're not on Rumble yet, make a Rumble account. If you are not signed up yet, go to my website, maninamerica.com. Sign up for the email on there. I don't, as of right now, not sending out very many emails, but in case I get booted off of YouTube, or you never know, that's one of the great ways to keep in touch. Follow me on Telegram and Safe Chat. Those links are below. And every person you can help share these videos to really helps a lot as well. So again, thank you. Gosh, it's just, I feel very blessed to be here with everybody. And I really appreciate you coming. So yeah, I guess that's it. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.